This is the Diverse Leaders Conversation Podcast, the only podcast for diverse leaders and founders. With your hosts, Dawn Morton-Young and Kat Wildman. The Diverse Leaders Conversation Podcast, starting up and rising up against the odds.
All right, so Hannah, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of the Diverse Leaders Conversation. And if you just want to tell us, first of all, who you are and what you do.
Thank you for having me, first of all, Dawn. So my name's Hannah, and I am a resourcing and ED&I leader in the automotive sector. So I've always worked in automotive, retail, or the construction sector. So always kind of sectors that have always been, I guess, underrepresented when it comes to diversity. So that's kind of my
quite male-dominated or historically male-dominated sectors.
Yeah, and also not really diverse when it comes to ethnicity either, I think, from the sectors that I've been in. So that's me, I guess.
Yeah, okay. So how do you think, just jumping right in there as we do, how do you think that your journey has been different from others who maybe don't have your diverse characteristics?
So I think I'm quite intersectional, so I always, so I've got hidden disabilities. So I think for me, it's always been having to justify, I think, from a hidden disability point of view, where, you know, when I'll park my car and I'll put my blue badge up and people will go, "You're not disabled, you know, you're not in a wheelchair, you've not got," and I do use a walking aid sometimes now because it has progressively got worse, but having to justify yourself quite a lot, where actually, you know, just because I'm not in a wheelchair, it's not visible, people don't think you are disabled. But my journey also, you know, I've had to, employers have lost out on me because they couldn't be flexible, and here we are now in a world where, you know, people are working remotely and it can be done. So, but also I'm just going through like an ADHD diagnosis, which, you know, what's really brought to light for me is that actually I know I've got ADHD, but the diagnosis itself is going to take about 3 years because of the waiting list that it takes for it to happen. So you can almost see that you go through a period of grief, of mourning, of the fact that what you could have achieved had you have had the support, everything that it almost feels like there's a weight that's been lifted because you now know that everything makes sense. But then you go through actually, had I had this support through my schooling, through the workplace, what could I have been? And it's a real mixed bag of emotions. But then you also have this thing where everybody thinks that they know what you need. Yeah. And sometimes you don't even know what you need because you're still figuring it out yourself. You still, you know, but then there's also that moment that actually I've got as far as I have just by being me. I'm pretty good. I know what I'm doing. But there's a real mix of it's kind of you're almost mourning yourself. But then you also have the ethnicity balance, the barriers that you have, and then you have the barriers that you're a woman. So it's for me, it's been a real intersectional.
It's the intersectionality of it, 100%. Just a couple of things that you said there. So the bit that you said in society about having hidden disabilities and perhaps, you know, people not recognising that. I mean, you see a lot more now signs that say things about not all disabilities are visible, and I think that there is becoming a change in understanding. But I do definitely empathise with you on that, in the sense that my youngest daughter has a very rare genetic condition. So she has poor coordination, balance, partial sight, lots of different, she goes to special needs school, etc. So we have a blue badge. But there'll be a lot of times that, say, for example, we're going to an appointment or we're going somewhere, it could be the cinema, wherever it is, and I will drop her and one of her older sisters outside so that she's nearer to the door. So I'll drop them right outside, and then I'll go and park the car. But I will park the car in the disabled space if there is one available, and I'll put the badge up, and I 100% get the same things, because I think that, and that is why a lot of some of the work that I do is around advocating for parent carers, particularly in the workplace. But I think that there is no consideration of carers that may be using the obviously they're in the car, they're driving the car for somebody. And, you know, part of me just thinks people just need to mind their own business sometimes. You know, if people would do that, because I shouldn't have to explain myself. I shouldn't have to say, you shouldn't have to explain yourself to someone and say X, Y, and Z. So, yeah, I think that there is changes in society and hopefully that will continue. But the other thing that I wanted to pick up on was where you were talking about if you had the support for your dyslexia or, you know, whatever your other neurodiverse traits, if you'd had that support earlier. And that's the conversation I was having yesterday, as I said, ironically, with another Hannah, where we came to the conclusion that in society, the law, the government, whoever it is, that they don't act until something is really in their face. So we were talking about dyslexia and saying that now it's much easier to get a test done, but it's still so expensive. However, there's a lot more children that have been diagnosed earlier than what has happened with a lot of adults who grew up with it with no support. And I said, but that's because it was becoming so prevalent that they couldn't ignore it. And so she was talking about also having symptoms of dysgraphia and other things, but there being no tests and there being no help for those things. And it's because they're not as apparent or they're being squashed in with other things. So it's not actually being recognized. And I think it's the same with your ADHD testing and your diagnosis for that is, although there are adults with ADHD, the support is for children in the mainstream. And I think that the recognition that people could be adults with ADHD is something that is blossoming now. Yeah.
And it shows, and I think so a lot of women now and women of colour, it's showing, are getting diagnosed later in life now because it doesn't show up the same way. So right. a lot of boys, so girls are not hyperactive, they're not jumping around. So the symptoms of ADHD that show up in women are different. So the symptoms are masked as a child. So, you know, I never was jumping around. I wasn't, fidgeting and those are not my symptoms. They still aren't my symptoms. So they would never, and that's why so many women now later in life are being diagnosed with ADHD, because they were never, so to young boys do get diagnosed earlier because the symptoms are different and they're only just figuring that out now. So women are getting diagnosed later. And we also know about the inequalities in the healthcare system for women of colour anyway. So the symptoms are showing up differently for women later in life, which is why women are now getting diagnosed in their late 20s, their 30s, their 40s, because the symptoms just show up differently.
Yeah.
So, that because, we aren't hyperactive, we aren't jumping around. And that's what, and I think that's
because I think they thought that boys were more prevalent of having ADHD because you didn't see girls that were presenting in the same way. And I think that's now we're learning that that's not necessarily the case. And it's worrying because when you think of even now looking at what's happening with things like menopause in the workplace and suddenly it now being recognised as, it's actually a disability going through menopausal symptoms. And I know I'm going through perimenopause at the moment early. And well, we say early, guess my body said it was time. But yeah, so and then you've got the stuff around menstrual holidays and things at least being discussed. But if you think that women have been having periods and menopause since the beginning of time and that it's taken to 2022 for that to be discussed, then when we think of this, recognizing that women have different needs, even within disabilities, neurodiversity, whichever way you want to talk about it, if I was a pessimist, I would be saying it's going to be a long road for us to be able to get the treatment and the support that we need. Absolutely.
And this is the thing, is that when you look at it, things show up differently for different people. So yeah. And again, it's how do we support each other, because there are again different disabilities that show up in different communities, and how do we look at how we support those and how do we recognise? And again, I really think it's having that people-centric approach, because I've spoke to other people with ADHD and they've gone, actually, this is how I work through it and what they've told me to do, I can't even bring myself to start doing what they do because my head just won't allow me to do those. I'm uncertain. So what works for one person won't work for everybody. It's really just having a people-centric approach. But I think, ultimately there is something out there that will help somebody, but how do we support someone to find that bit that is going to help someone?
And that's the giving that person the space, isn't it? So that's one of the reasons why I started this, the coaching in the niche that I coach in, because there was nobody that was kind of coming at it from a sense of people that from diverse groups, people from minority groups, we come from a different place. The mindset is different. Our experiences are so different that what you might typically be saying to, I don't know, what we would call a white middle-aged male or somebody, it's not going to land in the same way for us. We're not going to maybe connect with it in the same way. And so having a coaching program or a mentoring program that kind of understands why, women may feel diminished in the boardroom or in a leadership situation, or why they may feel like they need to act as if they are like a man to be heard or to be seen, or why people from ethnic minorities may give up because they've been told all their life that they have to work 10 times harder than somebody else to get to the same position. And if you've been told that all your life, sometimes you're tired. I don't want to work 10 times harder. Why should I have to? But you need somebody that understands that those are the mindsets that you're coming from and appreciates that, to be able to then coach them through it, really, and mentor them through it. And so that's why I do what I do. But I think that that's exactly what it is. It's about the people-centric approach and not just taking... One of my biggest bugbears with organizations is that they think, oh, we can do a strategy. We've done a strategy about ED&I, and that means that we've covered stuff. And it's like, that strategy has to be living, breathing, evolving, because what you're going to have to do is start to put out initiatives, start to do the work and see how it lands, see what difference it makes. And if it's not making a difference, you go back to the drawing board and you start again. That is, and that's kind of
experiment. It's an experiment. Yeah.
Exactly that, because you're learning about different sets of people, and we are learning all of the time. Even in the conversations I'm having now, I'm learning so much more about things that I thought I knew about. Yeah. So, we could be here all day. So is your day-to-day work experience affected because of your diverse needs or your diversity?
Yeah, I think anybody that is in a minoritized group, absolutely. I think we'd be lying to say it wasn't, because we're always trying to break down the barriers. We're always trying to work through barriers. Like you just said, when we've been told our whole lives you've got to work 10 times harder to get to just the same as, somebody that isn't.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. It is. And, you do have those days where you go, actually, I just don't want to. I just want to be seen. I just want to be heard. I just want to be able to walk up a flight of stairs without being exhausted. I just want to be able to jump on the train like everybody else. I don't want to be the person that has to keep putting my hand up going, actually, have we thought about this? Have we thought about that? And I don't want to be the troublemaker that keeps bringing things up because nobody else has thought about it. It is exhausting. It is exhausting. I don't want to have to think about my tone all the time. I don't want to have to worry about saying the wrong thing. That in itself is a job.
Yeah.
That in itself is a job, wondering how you're going to come across every day, wondering about when you come out, go, oh, did I say the right thing? Oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that. Oh my God, how's that going to be taken? That, I don't think people actually, they don't have to worry about that. Think about the mental toll that takes, but also the societal issues that we have to deal with as well. And then taking, I think a lot of organisations tell people to bring their whole selves to work, and that's a real bugbear to me, because when we ask people to bring their whole selves to work, we have to be really mindful of what's going on in the world right now. Yeah. Because if you ask me to bring my whole self to work, I'm going to bring all my mess into work. Like, my whole self is a whole lot of mess.
Yeah.
and I need to be safe enough to bring my whole lot of mess into it, because the world is a messy, messy place right now, and it needs to be safe enough, and you need to be okay for me to bring my mess into work. And there's some days where I'm not going to want to talk to anyone. I'm going to be angry. Yeah. I'm going to be furious. And if you ask me why I'm angry, I'm going to ask you why you're not. Yeah. And that is the reality, because it's a sad, it's a scary, it's a furious, like I'm furious some days. And that's what it is. And that's when, when you're asking people that are, ethnically diverse, people from the LGBTQ, some days we are furious because the world, it makes us furious some days.
Yeah. What support have you had from organisations, if any?
So I always talk about one leader that I had when I started my career, and it was actually only a few weeks ago that I really, really reflected on this, actually. So it was when I started my career, and it was when I was really reflecting on, like going through my diagnosis and me, being me. He was amazing. And I think he said something to me around, and I actually met up with him not long ago for, we just met up, we sat in the garden and we ate some snacks and whatever. And we were talking, and he said something that was really, really important. He said, when you have somebody in the room that is, really outspoken, because I am quite outspoken, brash, or, they say that person, and all the connotations that come with people like us, he said, always look at the person who's leading that person, because they're doing a great job, because they're allowing that person to be who they are.
I love that.
He always had my back. And every time I would be, whenever I had to deal with microaggressions or whatever, I'd always turn around and he'd be behind me. But there would be days where, I'm not comfortable with, so I wasn't comfortable with data. Data was, and now that I'm going through this ADHD stuff, I know that's why. It all makes sense why I wasn't comfortable.
The way that data. You process things, yeah.
Differently. And, we would sit in, I'd have days where I'd cry because it would be so overwhelming. And he'd just let me cry it out. He'd sit there and maybe go get a cup of coffee. I'd cry it out. And they'd come back and go, right, we're going to do this now. And he'd put it up on the whiteboard. And I remember doing the, do you remember, like the insights, the colours? I was always sunshine yellow. But by the time he had coached me, I was equal sunshine yellow and I was blue data. But he spent that time. But one thing is, he never asked me to change. He never, ever asked me to change. He always allowed me to be me. He always championed me, whether I was in the room, outside the room. But he never, ever asked me to change. Always had my back, no matter what. And he was such a human leader that he just set the foundation for me of what leadership is. And it was only now, and it came to my wedding. I've always he'll always have this. He'll always be on a pedestal for me, because for me, he just allowed me to. But he just gave me this safe space to make mistakes, to break when I needed to break, put me back together again. Just believe, he never. Well, he did make me feel different. He made me feel like there was nothing I couldn't achieve.
Yeah.
But when I messed up, he'd be there behind me. And because I had that, I didn't mess up. But I could be. If someone said that, she's come across in this way, he'd be going, well, did you interpret it in the wrong way? Because and he'd just have my back. And that was really, really important. And that's the best support I've ever had in my life.
Because I think a lot of the time we feel like we're alone. And I know that I noticed earlier on you were saying, I was going to slip into a bit of coaching with you earlier on, actually, when you were talking about have I said the wrong thing, and coming out and second guessing, and that is a big thing, because we're trying to be palatable, and because we know we're different, and because we know that maybe how we live our lives is different to a lot of the people that we work with, we do this assimilation thing. But I said to somebody the other day, why is it that we always try to diminish ourselves to make other people less embarrassed, or to make other people less. So I was talking to her, and it's somebody else that we've had one of these conversations with, and she was saying in her business, she's got dyslexia, in her business, somebody sent some information over to her and they sent it in an Excel spreadsheet and she can't look at it with the lines. So I said, did you ask them to copy and paste it into a Word document and resend it back? And she said, oh no, I would just do that. She said, oh, I've never asked anybody to resend me the information. And I'm like, why? And she's like, oh, because I know that they'll be embarrassed. And I'm like, but then how do they learn? And how do you make sure the next time that you get the information in the way that you need to get it? And so there's a lot that I'm thinking about at the moment about that very thing. The fact that we are the, let's call it victims. We are the victims, but we are trying to work out how to make the perpetrator feel better for perpetrating. Yeah. And when we think about it from that angle, it's kind of like, actually, I should be just saying, these are my wants and these are my needs. And the world should just be learning that these are my wants and these are my needs.
And I think there's also that, that's that space where you go, actually, I don't know what my wants and my needs are just yet, but just bear with me while I help me figure it out.
Yeah.
Help me figure it out, because I don't know what they are just yet. And, while I'm figuring it out, and I think there is that fear, I think, especially when it comes to the neurodiversity, that actually, when I tell you, you're going to think I'm less than capable.
Yeah. That's what she said. She said, people think I'm stupid.
Yeah. Are you going to think I'm less than capable? Are you going to think, oh, actually there is a stigma around, whether neurodiverse, or you're going to think, are you going to take things away from me? You're going to think, while I'm figuring this out, or actually that means you can't do that. So I'm just going to give it to somebody else. So your workload's going to go, and suddenly, things just start dipping off, and, things will go to somebody else. And the next time there's a promotion that comes up, that's not going to go to you, because you're,
and because you're not performing at the level of somebody else, because what they've done is taken away your work rather than support you to do it.
Or they just don't understand, actually, because you might not work in a different way. So with ADHD, when somebody is hyper focused, they are and actually it might mean putting extra support around, where things that you're not hyper focused on. Build a team to support that person with the stuff that that they're not great at, or they're not going to be hyper focused in. So if it is menial tasks, give them an extra resource. But where they are hyper focused, they're going to give you something spectacular and amazing. So it's about, actually, again, like I said, it's that people-centric approach. So if somebody is great at project management and they're hyper focused they're going to give you something amazing. Take their admin away from them, get an administrator, or put that somewhere else, because that's what's going to slow them down, because they're going to get ADHD paralysis, because if you give them a menial task, they're going to be flat, and that will just wipe them out. Where actually, if you put that somewhere else, give them an administrator to take those tasks, because they will thrive, and they will give you 12 hours worth of work in 4, because that's where they super focused.
But that's the bit, isn't it? It's about the understanding of that. So because we're kind of taught that disabilities and neurodiversity are problems rather than looking at them from a side of strengths, and I think that is the bit, isn't it? It's about educating employers of the strengths of people with, and I know they're seeing it now with people that have Asperger's and hiring them to do things that involve data and coding and all of that kind of thing, because as you said, they will just sit there and do it and they won't be, but I think it's around that understanding of the gifts, so that they appreciate that and don't think, oh, if I have to get another administrator, this person's costing me money, and they realize how much money they're saving and making them. And I think that's part of the education, and I'm actually, that's part of what I'm hoping that these conversations do, is for them to get an understanding of, when you're supporting people with diverse needs, you're actually investing in your business. You're not taking away from your business. So I think that's important.
And I think if you told someone that, Richard Branson's got ADHD, and they said, would you invest in him? Would they
say yes?
Would they say, let's give him tasks that he doesn't really need to do, or let's focus on his innovation?
Yeah. and his people and his ability to engage people as well, because he's got a really personable nature. So what general barriers, I know we spoke about that a little bit, what general barriers have you faced, I guess, with your disability? We spoke a little bit about in society with people not recognising because your disabilities are hidden and things like that. But in terms of, is there anything else that you would say that would be a barrier to you more generally?
I think, again, it's just, race barriers that you have. Again, back to the disability barriers. I think you have, like with the blue badge and stuff. I think there was a time where it had happened to me 3 times in 1 week, and I was with my husband actually, and he was driving, and I put my badge up, and the looks that we got, I just had a moment, where you just go, I've just had enough, and some woman just literally just rolled her eyes at me, and I'd had enough, and I probably shouldn't have, but I went up to her and I just said, have you got a problem? And she's like, what? I said, you've just rolled your eyes at me because she'd assumed I didn't have a badge. And then she saw I put my badge, and you almost see people roll their eyes, you put the badge on, and then they roll their eyes again as though it's probably not hers. It's
stolen.
And I said, have you looked at like what's wrong? She was like, nothing. I said, but you rolled your eyes at me. I said, because I parked in disabled. I said, so if you've got I said, let's have a conversation, let's talk about it, because you've clearly made a judgment on me because I've put a badge in there. But like, if you've got a problem, I'm here, let's talk about it. And she didn't want to have a conversation, but it's so tiresome when you literally just want to go to Boots to pick up your prescription, or you just want to go and get your bananas from the shop, like whatever it is you want to do.
And then you've got people placing judgment on you. But then, Hannah, that's something that I guess we have anyway, with or without a disability, just from being what we are. Whether that's being female or being from an ethnic minority background, is that people do just look at you and not, I get it all the time, and it's only when I open my mouth and I start to speak to them and they think that there's a semblance of intelligence that I'm taken seriously. So, I think it's a sad thing, but it's something that we are still kind of dealing with on a daily basis.
And I think this is, and I had a conversation with somebody around, and someone said to me, Hannah, you can't see injustice. He said, you've got to, when you see an injustice, you've got to do something about it. And somebody said to me, I like to, put my phone away and not look at it. And I said, actually, that's a privilege that you have, because, when I go to the supermarket, so me and my husband went to the supermarket 3 weeks ago, and we got our shopping thrown at us. And then when I tapped my card on the machine, when you tap it and then they say, please put the card in, that the assistant felt the need to say, you need to put your card in the machine at the top of his voice, because we think you've stolen it, at the top of his voice.
No way.
In front of everybody. And then I said, pardon? And he said it again, even loudly. I said, so, as much as I might, even if I do turn my phone off and don't look at it, you live it every day. After Brexit,
that's awful.
After Brexit, somebody again at the shop said to me, have you seen the result of Brexit? It won't be long till you lot are gone and you're not here anymore. These are stuff that
what area of England? Whereabouts?
I live in Northampton, so it's a predominantly white area. So this is,
it's not that you would have thought it's not that.
It's got better, but it's just, but these are so as much as if I turn my phone off and I don't look at it, to go and get your onions and your peppers and your bread, you can't stop living it. This is the reality for us. So, to just turn it or turn off to it it's not an option. So to see something, we can't just not say anything, because it's life. It's life. And that's the reality. And they're the barriers that, and for me, I guess we're kind of used to, but I'll be damned if my children have to deal with that. I'm not, I've got, my nieces, my nephews, my children, if they turn around to me and say, well, what did you do? I can't be the person that says I did nothing.
Nothing.
I stayed silent. Absolutely not.
Yeah, and I think, I'm really one of that believes that people are placed here for a reason, and that passion that we have to fight against injustice and to talk about stuff and to try to support each other, it's been put into us for a reason and for some sort of impact to be made in the world. So just last couple of questions. So what advice would you give to others to help with their career journey? So other people that might be coming up with that could be facing the same things as you.
I think the biggest thing for me is build your network. Build your network is the most. So LinkedIn is a great way. Don't feel like you have to know the people. I know that sounds really weird, but don't feel like you have to know the people face to face or you've got to have met them. Build your network. It's amazing how many, I would even say friends now that I've made. Some people, across the pond, like all over the world. Build your network because there is so much care. There is so much, learning. People will share their learning, but also you'll build yourself a safe space. So it's amazing how much people will be there to comfort you, to share their stories with you. So build your network. And then when you are looking for jobs and stuff, that also helps as well with the network. Yeah.
It's one of the things that I teach as well is around building your network and how to do that, because we didn't often have the opportunity like some of our counterparts would have done to get work experience from people that owned businesses or go to certain schools and make friends that would help later on in life. So, some of the stuff that I do is around that whole building effective and quality networks, really, that can help you as you go along. So, I think that's great. And the last thing is, if there was one thing that an organisation could do or something that you've seen done to support you, what would it be?
I think, again, it's that people, I think it's, I always say to people, so I obviously work within the ED&I field, but for organisations, they are so worried about getting things wrong, so they don't do things, they just wait. And I always say, you don't have to be an expert to care. Yeah. Like, just care, be authentic. And I always say for people, so people are really worried about getting things wrong, their uncomfortability, their discomfort, but they often don't think about the empathy and the discomfort of the person who is different to them and how they might feel walking into a room of people that are not like them. So everybody else is the same. You're the one that's different and you're walking to them. So flip your discomfort to the person that is different to you and imagine how they're feeling for a minute. And if you do that, the amount of power that will give to, and the amount of empathy and all of that one person will feel just for a minute, and just look at who you're being a cheerleader for.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think what COVID has done and what the pandemic has done is really forced employers to see their employees as human. When I got into HR because I felt like people spent the majority of their day at work, and how could I help businesses to help their employees who essentially are spending so much time there, and making those places a place that they belonged, a place where their mental health was supported, a place where their well-being was supported, and also have that strategic angle of being able to help businesses make money through their people, essentially. I think that having that time in the pandemic where we were on Zoom calls and seeing people's kids running around and, things was happening, I think that that's really helped organisations to see employees more as a more human being, rather than just somebody that they work with or that they lead or boss around. So I'm hoping that goes to change that all in the future. So I just wanted to really say thank you so much.
Thank you
for joining us.